The airlock hissed shut behind me, but the one in front wouldn't open. I was alone in the level 3 clean room, sealed inside a sterile, windowless box at 2 in the morning. My job was simple, if tedious: monitor the overnight automated cell cultures for the biotech startup where I worked. The clean room was a maze of gleaming white panels, humming incubators, and glove ports that allowed you to manipulate samples without breaking containment. The only way in or out was through a series of interlocking airlocks, and the system was controlled by a central computer that logged every entry and exit. I stared at the status light above the inner door. It glowed a stubborn, unwavering red. I tapped the control panel. Nothing. A flat, digital voice chimed from the ceiling speaker. Containment protocol active. Decontamination cycle required for egress. That wasn't right. The decon cycle was only supposed to run if biosafety protocols were triggered, like a suit breach. I was suited up, fully sealed. I spoke to the room, my voice muffled by my helmet. System override. Command, open inner airlock. The speaker crackled. Override requires dual authorization. Second authorization not present. A chill that had nothing to do with the room's climate crept down my spine. There was no one else here. The lab was empty. I was the only one scheduled for the overnight shift this week. I pulled out my phone. No signal. The clean room was a Faraday cage by design, to prevent interference with sensitive equipment. I was cut off. I told myself it was a glitch. The company was new. The systems were buggy. I just waited out. The cycle would finish. The door would open. I tried to focus on my work, checking the nutrient feeds through the glove ports. That's when I noticed the first discrepancy. The log screen for incubator B7 showed a manual access entry 20 minutes prior. My access. But I hadn't touched B7. I'd been at the far end of the room the whole time. I stared at the entry, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. The system tracked which glove port was used. It said I'd used port 12. I was standing right next to port 12, nervous. I looked at the port's sealed cover. Behind it, in the incubator, were delicate viral vector samples. Nothing seemed disturbed. Maybe it was a timestamp error. I forced a breath and moved down the line. 10 minutes later, a low beep echoed through the sterile silence. The main overhead lights shut off, plunging the room into the dim, eerie glow of the equipment status LEDs. The emergency lights along the floor flickered on, casting long, dancing shadows from the machinery. The digital voice returned. Power conservation mode engaged. Non-essential systems offline. The air circulation fans dropped to a whisper. Suddenly, the room felt stifling, the walls closer. My suit's internal cooling unit struggled against the rising heat. I made my way back to the airlock in the semi-darkness, my suit rustling loudly. The control panel was dark, dead. I pounded a gloved fist on the thick plexiglass window of the inner door. It was futile. As I turned away, a movement in the reflection of a darkened monitor screen made me freeze. It was just a flash, a darker shape shifting between two incubator stacks behind me. I whirled around, my helmet light cutting a swath through the gloom. Nothing there, just the familiar landscape of equipment. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Scared, the rational part of my brain screamed pareidolia, stress playing tricks. The primal part screamed, someone else is in here. The clean room wasn't huge, but it was a labyrinth of tall equipment racks. Plenty of places to hide, but that was impossible. The logs would show another entry. Unless they never left from the last shift. The thought was so absurd I almost laughed, but the laugh died in my throat. A new sound began. A rhythmic, metallic click-clack, click-clack. It was coming from the biosafety cabinet near the waste autoclave. It sounded like someone tapping a metal tool against the cabinet's grate. I stood perfectly still, listening. The tapping stopped. Then, from a different corner of the room, near the liquid nitrogen tanks, I heard it again. Click-clack, click-clack. It was moving. It was toying with me. Panic. "Who's there?" I yelled, my voice trembling. The tapping stopped instantly. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the thrum of my own pulse in my ears. Then the ceiling speaker fizzed to life. But instead of the digital voice, it played a burst of sound, muffled, distorted. I strained to hear. It was a recording of my own voice from earlier saying glitch. The company is new. It cut off with a screech of feedback. They were listening. They had been listening the whole time. Terror became a sharp, clarifying fire. I wasn't waiting anymore. I had to get to the manual release. Every airlock had a mechanical bypass, a small red-handled lever behind a sealed panel for emergencies. It would flood the room with chemical decon spray. But I didn't care. I started toward the wall where I knew the panel was. As I passed a long workbench, my helmet light glinted off something that shouldn't have been there. Lying neatly on the sterile surface was a single disposable lab coat booty. It was inside the clean room, on the wrong side of the containment. Someone had taken it off in here. This was no glitch. This was a violation so profound it made me dizzy. They weren't just hiding. They were living here, suited up, moving among the samples. I snatched up the booty. It was still slightly damp with condensation from inside a suit. The tapping started again, faster now, impatient. Click-clack, click-clack. It was closer. I dropped the booty and ran, my breath fogging the visor. I reached the emergency panel, fumbling with the safety latch. It opened. The red lever was there. I grabbed it and pulled. Nothing happened. It was locked in place with a small, keyed padlock. A padlock that didn't belong, that wasn't on any safety schematic. Furious, I yanked at it, sobbing with frustration. Behind me, I heard a new sound, the soft, sighing hiss of a glove port being detached from its seal. I turned. At port 12, the port the log said I had used, the cover was off. The heavy rubber glove that should have been sealed inside was hanging limp, deflated, its interior coated in a faint, greasy smear. Someone had just taken their hand out of it. They were out of their suit, in my clean room, with me. The finality of it crushed the air from my lungs. They could be anywhere in the gloom, breathing the same filtered air I was now terrified to inhale. I did the only thing left. I backed into a corner, grabbed a heavy stainless steel reagent bottle from a cart, and with a scream that tore my throat raw, I smashed it into the small, reinforced window of the inner airlock. The first blow just glanced off. The second made a spiderweb crack. The third, with all my weight behind it, shattered it. Alarms blared, deafening, pulsating sirens. Strobes erupted from the ceiling, painting the nightmare scene in frantic bursts of white light. In one of those stark, frozen flashes, I saw a figure. It was crouched atop an incubator unit at the far end of the aisle, a dark silhouette against the blinding strobe, utterly still, watching me. It wasn't wearing a suit. I didn't wait. I shoved my arm through the broken window, ignoring the shards scraping against my suit sleeve, and felt for the external manual release on the other side. My fingers brushed it, slipped, then found purchase. I pulled. With a shuddering groan, the inner airlock door unsealed. I fell through into the small chamber. The outer door was still sealed. I scrambled up and hit the emergency open for the final door. It slid aside. I stumbled out into the empty, fluorescent-lit hallway, collapsing onto the cool linoleum. I tore off my helmet, gasping in deep, ragged breaths of unconditioned air. The alarms were still screaming inside the clean room. I called security from a wall phone, my words a jumbled mess. They found nothing, no one. The outer airlock logs showed no entry after mine. The padlock on the manual release was gone. The booty was gone. The only evidence was the broken window and the deflated glove on port 12, which they said must have malfunctioned. My report was filed as a panic attack induced by a faulty door seal and low oxygen. I quit the next day. They made me sign a non-disclosure agreement. I still don't know what that person wanted. Samples? Sabotage? Or just the profound, intimate terror of sharing a sealed space with someone who wasn't supposed to be there? Someone who knew the systems better than I did. Someone who watched me from the shadows until I broke. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I'll wake up and hear a faint, imaginary click-clack in the silence of my own home, and I'll remember the feeling of that sterile, recycled air, and know I was never really alone in that room. And that's where the story ends. See you in the next episode. Don't forget to subscribe.